You ready for this? This will be a controversial car.
This technology is so extraordinary.
Your question was very tricky.
We could create something completely new.
For me, there is no design without innovation.
You're about to see the first ever all-electric Ferrari. A car Ferrari said they'd never make. That will probably be the most controversial car they've ever made. And will definitely be a massive risk. New tech and new design that will impact all of us, whether or not we ever drive a Ferrari. So I'm at a secret track in Italy to get a first look before it launches and talk to the two people most responsible for it. Apple legend Jony Ive, who showed me the crazy details inside this car, and Ferrari chief designer Flavio Manzoni, who told me the real reason why they made it and why it matters for Ferrari, for electric cars, and you and me. Welcome to Huge Conversations.
Iconic sports car Ferrari.
Ferrari is a legend.
The most powerful brand in the world.
Ferrari is set to release its first ever EV.
Should people see the Ferrari Luce as the future of Ferrari? The man who brought us touch screens wants us to touch fewer screens.
I mean, history will ultimately determine that.
You are fantastic. My God,
It's a real
right.
honor. This conversation isn't for the 14,000 people that will buy Ferraris this year, although I hope that we're going to delight them with the details that we get into. This is a huge conversation, meaning that it's a conversation for the millions of people that are really excited about new technology, that want to see the future, they want to be part of it, and they want to understand how big bets from people like yourself affect their lives. The thing that is so interesting to me here, the reason that I am here, is that when I think about a Ferrari, I think about a really specific feeling of vibration from the engine. I think about a really specific silhouette of a car. And this looks and feels very, very different. In fact, when I first saw this car, it was a bit of a shock. It's not just the first ever all-electric Ferrari. It's also the first ever 5-seat Ferrari. It's a big car. And I thought, why didn't Ferrari make a 2-seater sports car in red with fake engine sound to be as similar as possible to what people expect in a Ferrari? But on this show, we don't dismiss new tech, and we don't artificially hype it either. What we do is we want to understand what it means for the future. The headline, "Sports car company makes sports car," would have been fine, but probably not huge if true. But that's not what they chose to do. And that's really interesting to me. Making it intentionally larger is interesting, in addition to it being an electric car. Bringing in your team and working together in this collaboration is really interesting. Frankly, asking me to do this interview is interesting. I'm not an automotive expert. I'm someone who's trying to explain something to a wide audience. And so there's so much here that Ferrari is doing that is different than what Ferrari has done before. Why?
Good question, Johnny. You first.
Ferrari is an organization with an insatiable appetite to be pushing and exploring. I mean, remember, Ferrari have been building the most advanced electric motors for decades. I think the context is one to be pushing, to explore, to be surprised. For the first time, I think, ever, you have this combination of the extraordinary sort of Ferrari driving dynamic, which is so joyful and fun, but instead of it being a very singular car, as in, its purpose, it's a sports car for two people, it is being able to combine that with being much more approachable, more egalitarian, which is an absurd thing to say for a product that is so inherently exclusive. But to be able to combine space, and not just volume, but the airiness of the experience inside the cabin, with this amazing driving experience, which could only be achieved by using this technology.
You have to start from a technological approach and then translate it into something which is which materializes the essence of that project. So in this case, it was necessary a completely out-of-the-box approach.
Ferrari doesn't need to do this. This is a controversial and extremely risky because of the degree of innovation. There was not a sense of obligation. There was a sense of this sort of passionate drive, believing this technology is so extraordinary. We could create something completely new.
I think that the broader context is important here too. Flavio, you joined Ferrari in 2010. In 2011, the CEO of Ferrari at the time said, quote, "You will never see an electric Ferrari." But the context of that quote is that at the time, the most popular electric car in the world was the Nissan Leaf. Tesla hadn't launched the Model S yet. Electric cars as a total share of cars in the world was a rounding error. And now today, 25% of new vehicles sold globally are electric cars. In the US, it's only 10% and has been flat since 2023. But in Europe, it's around 25%. And the EU banned new combustion car sales after 2035, though now they've walked that back. And biggest of all, in China, more than half of new car sales are electric cars, and that's growing fast. How should I think about what's happening around the world as part of this conversation?
Okay, coming back to your comment regarding the CEO of the time, he also stated never an SUV. Ferrari will never make an SUV. Then after a while, he said, no, we will do a new Purosang, not a typical bulky SUV, but something really innovative and really embodying the spirit of Ferrari. What a challenge, incredible. Now, I mean, at the time it was so criticized, now it's the bestseller. So it's the same for the electric one. I mean, it's a matter of embracing the innovation and also the cultural change. Most of the companies are not really willing to make something extraordinarily new. Okay, so really representing the innovative step of the technology. So if you look at the others, I mean, the approach is very conservative. So sometimes they don't look electric cars. So the question was how to make a clear statement. A car like this can create is something totally different.
You know together that no matter what you make here with the first ever all-electric Ferrari, you're going to get a lot of excitement and you're going to get a lot of critique. This will be a controversial car. And it's not just about Ferrari, right? It's about all technology that we try to bring into the future in some way. People lost their minds when Formula One went from the V8 to the V6 hybrid. They criticized the sound of the F80. But what we're talking about is not actually performance in some specific ways, right? The V6 is faster than the V8 or the V12 in the most generous way possible. What do you feel is the real debate that we're having here?
It's not new for us. Critics are part of the process because when you want to innovate, it's normal, especially in an era like this where, sorry, but I have to be a little bit critical as well, because the problem is that we are living in an era where the nostalgic approach is very high. Everybody is looking at the past, not at the future. So that means our job as designers is very difficult. Nevertheless, for me, there is no design without innovation. So that means also to risk. It's typical, for example, on the F80, the latest supercar, everybody is complaining because it has not a 12-cylinder engine. I mean, but the performance, incredible performance of that car was impossible with a traditional 12-cylinder engine. The concept itself of an electric Ferrari is polarizing. The launch of a new car with a very innovative design, the first reaction is, oh my God, this is not correct, this is not a Ferrari. Everybody is an expert. But then, after some months, when they digest, they metabolize the innovation, it becomes part of this continuous, let's say, journey towards the future.
You're no stranger to these moments.
For 40, 50 years, I've been so intrigued by how people react and how they feel faced with something new. And as you know, we know everyone has an opinion, but normally what people do in trying to understand what's new, you try to reference what's familiar. I've been very used to that, and I've been able to sort of predict, okay, this will be what people will be intrigued by, this is what people will be challenged by. I think, though, as you said, there is this huge challenge here because as a Ferrari lover and the combustion engine and all that's associated with it, whether it's the noise, the vibration, that has been a substantial part of the past. I'm sure it will be a substantial part of the future. So it's not that we're taking away something, but we're adding a new choice, which in some dimensions is unambiguously, incontrovertibly better. And in other dimensions, you will understand them in terms of what is lacking. Perhaps it was reckless of us to do that, knowing that we were, of course, in some people's eyes, destined for failure. But I think we also love these absurd challenges, and we work very hard to try and explore other ways that you can connect directly and viscerally and physically, you know, in lieu of there being a combustion engine making a noise.
And what challenge for you guys, because it was the first car ever designed by you, right?
Yeah, it's...
So that tells how important it was for the company to find a totally different approach,
Yes.
coming from another perspective.
Ferrari delivered, 13,640 cars in 2025. It's 81% of those were to people that already owned Ferraris.
Yeah.
48% to people who own more than one. Why does this car matter for the lives of the people that won't buy it?
I think anything that's made has an impact whether you happen to own it or not. Mm-hmm. I think that's one of the things that has, so bothers me, which is so much is made that I don't think deserves to be made because resources are precious. And I think to try to make something sincerely and earnestly that is trying to move things on, not to be new, not to be different, but to be better. I obviously agree that this is, inherently an exclusive product, but the thinking isn't exclusive. I've been lucky enough in my past work to see, this sort of vicarious impact that thinking and ideas can have, sometimes poorly applied, sometimes surprising and wonderful and lovely. So I do think it's a responsibility of designers to realize I personally really, and I take this really seriously, have a genuine responsibility for humanity in that it's not just your customer is the relevant party.
Never forget the cultural
Yes.
importance of this type of operation. I think also about the courage of experimenting. There is a beautiful sentence of Eric Fromm who said, creativity requires the courage of let go of certainties.
Yeah.
I think this is a beautiful definition
Yes.
of this this project.
Okay, so Jony said reckless, Flavio said a challenge. I still want to know why it really matters. Is it that Ferrari is going to make millions of new people buy electric cars? No, or at least not directly. They wouldn't tell me exactly what this car will cost, except that it's in the high end of their range. So I would guess $650,000. So this car isn't going to change anything through volume sales. And on paper, It's in the same neighborhood as electric sports cars that already exist. So 4 electric motors, 1 per wheel, 1,035 horsepower, 0 to 100 kilometers per hour in 2.5 seconds, top speed of about 310 kilometers per hour or around 193 miles per hour, and an estimated top range of about 530 kilometers. But they are trying to reach a new market for Ferrari. And most importantly, they're trying to set the bar for what an electric car can feel like. One of the biggest bets they're making here is in the interior. Its design goes against what many car companies are doing today. So, time to get inside with the man who designed it. Show me the magic that you created. Let's get into the car. Right. I would love to see what it's like. All right, I'm gonna get in on the other side. Sitting with you holding in my hand my iPhone. When this came out, it really meaningfully changed people's understanding of what a phone could be. It changed the way that we live our lives. And I'm sitting with you now in the electric Ferrari that you designed. Could you show me the experience that this has and tell me about how you hope that this changes what people think of in electric cars?
I would love to, Cleo. I mean, one point to make is that for some reason, just because the power source is electric, there is some assumption that the interface should be digital. And that's a huge leap. And I think it's presumptuous. When you're used to getting into a Ferrari and you turn the key, you know that it's the beginning of something significant. And you know that by what you hear and what you feel, and it's very clear. And that was one of the things as somebody who loves the sound of a V12 combustion engine, trying to really be very clear and honest about that as a challenge was significant. So we tried to have, our goal was to try and figure out ways of viscerally and physically connecting us to the car. Yeah. And so this is just a new way. Just as there was one way with the phone, this is a. I mean, that's my fascination: is how do us as how does humanity connect to technology? So the key, which is very simple, it's leather on the back, it's stainless steel on the sides, and then has a glass front. Now watch the yellow disappear and transfer to the drive select.
One of the things that I'm noticing here is that you are not mimicking my experience of a combustion car, meaning your option when you put in the key was, of course, to add fake sound, add fake roar. Other cars do it. Other cars do add that. You could have recreated the experience and mimicked the experience of being in a combustion engine Ferrari.
Yes. So the obvious thing, or certainly the easy, lazy thing to do, would be to mimic what people are familiar with. I think consumers and users are really smart. I think they're really discerning. And I think that they value authenticity. They know when it's fake. This collection of instruments and the steering wheel, that's all you actually need to drive. We were very clear that's all about output. The steering wheel obviously is all about input. Now the steering wheel, you can see, has these modules that have a whole range of different tactile switches. You don't just see with your eyes, you sense, of course, with your fingers. So this is called a manettino. This is a dial that Ferrari invented and really determines the driving dynamics. So you can see that, so this is set to dry. Now, if I set it to sport, you'll watch the color here is orange. And the dial, everything changes to orange.
But then it goes back.
And then it gently recedes to being closer to white, so you get the maximum contrast for function. So that's the other thing. There's nothing here that isn't about utility and function. One of the things we were excited about with this was because this wasn't all about driving, it could be just for your passenger or your co-pilot. So the idea that you can adjust, the position of the control panel. But the nice thing, I think, is that the handle, you think it's a handle, but I think more importantly than it being a handle, it's exactly in the way you're using it.
I did that naturally. I did that without thinking about it.
You didn't read any instructions.
I mean, even when I'm using my Apple Watch,
Look at your thumb.
I put this here and then I move it. You said in an interview that people are dying because of dumb design. Can you tell me what you meant by that?
So, for example, multi-touch is wonderful for a phone because when you're using the phone, you're looking at the phone. Multi-touch shouldn't be in a car, I believe, because if you're having to do basic things, it requires, of course, by definition, that you're not looking where you're going and you're looking at a display. So I think, while, I was lucky enough to be involved in the development of multi-touch, it's a fabulous technology that enables some very new user interfaces, but that need to be appropriate and thoughtfully and carefully used.
The headlines will say, "The man who brought us touch screens wants us to touch fewer screens." But what I'm seeing here is actually something pretty different. There is a screen sitting in front of me.
We're not treating things in this sort of very binary way. We're not saying, here's a digital output and a digital input, and that's it. What we're doing is we're combining handles and palm rests and physical toggle switches and rotary dials. That's been my focus over the last 40 years is how does humanity connect to the tools that we make? And it can be one that is joyful and enabling and elevating, or it can be one that is frustrating and irritating and disconnecting and isolating. And to me, that point of interaction, that point of connection is by definition, it's a mixture of what is physical, what is digital, what is about, the temperature and weight of materials. There are so many things, so many elements that define that point of connection.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay, wait, I brought something for you. So, when you mentioned earlier
Yes.
that when you were starting this design, you created 4 books. These books, as far as I know, have been secret up until now. I could not find on my way here any of the inside of these books, but I have one with me right now. This is one of the secret books that you made for Ferrari, and I want to show you something. You said, "We often think of the Swiss watch industry during the electric quartz revolution. It's hard not to see parallels between valuable historic brands like Patek Philippe, who survived and grew into the transition, primarily because it retained its traditional mechanical movements. If it had been legislated that Patek Philippe had to transition its entire product line to quartz, the resulting challenge would appear similar to the transition Ferrari is facing. While we're mindful of the enormity of this transition, we know that pursuing well-founded, big, ambitious ideas will enable the most powerful, compelling, and profoundly successful outcome." Do you feel like you accomplished what you set out to do?
Well, history will, I think, ultimately determine that. I think what I think we do feel confident in is that this collaboration has been so invigorating and has established principles and reminded us all of what it takes to try to push forward, not to be different, not to be new, but to try to solve problems in new ways, to try to connect us to technology in new ways.
Sitting in the car, I found myself just playing like a kid with all of the buttons and the switches. And I just kept thinking about how different it was than what I expected, especially from Jony Ive. You've designed things already that at least 2.5 billion people use. People spend hours a day staring at the screens that you designed. What do you think of the way that we've used them? And what have you learned from the experience of watching people iterate on and use the things that you built?
There are very clear lessons to be learned. Any powerful tool has potential for unpredictable and unexpected good and bad. And that's always been the case. And so I feel, candidly, I do feel, even though there are unpredicted consequences of some of the work that we've done, some good, some bad, even though they were not intended, I still think you need to be responsible. And I do feel that responsibility, and that drives the decisions that I have made and I'm making for how I can try and contribute in the future. But that's not a new phenomena. Any powerful technology or tool will surprise us in a lot of different ways, I think.
Yeah. When I came into this story, when I asked that first question of why does this matter for millions of people if a couple thousand will end up owning a car like this, one of the answers that I thought was, well, if Ferrari and if Jony Ive and his team create a vision for what an electric car can be, maybe some of that design inspiration will trickle into the rest of the car ecosystem. And I am seeing some of that here.
Yes.
What do you feel like is the main way that these specific design choices that you make will affect a bigger picture?
That's a lovely way of thinking about this project, which is, I've seen over the last 40 years that innovating in one space can have a enormous impact. So I understand that, and I understand, the mechanisms of that. But I think you're exactly right. These products are so complex. They're way beyond one person. I guess I really hope that people think, wow, if Ferrari, with its extraordinary expertise in history, can invest so much time and energy into a collaboration, an unlikely collaboration, I hope that somehow, seems significant.
If instead of me sitting here, it were Steve Jobs, and you were describing to him the ambition that you have for this car and the vision and how you brought it to life, what do you think he would say?
It's really hard because as such close friends, I've had to sort of endure other people inferring his thinking and his motivations. So I wouldn't presume to say what he would, how he would respond. But I owe so much of what I've learned to him, and I know I wouldn't be sat here if it wasn't for him. Those were wonderful questions.
Thank you for saying that.
Really provocative and thank you so much.
Thank you. I feel like I'm stepping away from this car with a new perspective. Saying it was similar to if it had been legislated feels like an acknowledgement of the massive change that the world is going through in electric cars. This is happening worldwide with or without Ferrari, and they want it to be with. And to do that, they've made this big bet. And we should encourage companies to do that. In a world where a lot of product launches today are micro improvements on the new thing, I find it refreshing when a company takes a big bet. So that's what I'm going to talk to Flavio about. Starting with, why bring in Jony Ive and his team in the first place? This was one of my big questions, because of course you're famous for creating an in-house design team inside Ferrari.
Yeah.
But for this big bet, you bring in a new group of people. I'm curious how that felt for you and why you chose to do that.
It was a little bit shocking at the beginning, of course, because for me, the consistency across the models and also this idea of an evolution, even with some radical steps, because evolution also means to somehow to redefine the design criteria of a brand. Otherwise, if we don't innovate, we don't do anything. But the idea of our president, our chairman, John Elkann, was to make something really disruptive. So it was necessary to have another pencil, different, to create, for example, a new, capsule collection.
Yeah.
And this is a way to guarantee the highest level of originality and also freshness of the ideas. I mean, they were alone for run about 8 months in San Francisco to let them the time to conceive, let's say, a very coherent, let's say, concept.
And then there is, I imagine, a moment where you see that first result for the first time. What was that like for you? What were the things that most excited you when you saw it for the first time? And what were the things that you pushed back against that didn't feel like Ferrari?
I think it was very exciting to see how they were able to conceive something that I couldn't even imagine. So something radically different. And of course, this is matter of cross-fertilization, They come from another mindset. They worked not on cars, they worked on other type of products. They were able to develop their own vision that is also about specific design criteria. For example, there are some forms, that we call...
Use the Italian word if you want. We'll try and translate it.
It's English, that we call spherical. Mm-hmm. It's a rounded square, okay, which I would say is a quite present element, not only on the interior, but also on the exterior. Okay, for example, the front end, the rear end are really designed based on this very simple idea. Mm-hmm. So everything is based on purity, simplicity, a kind of monolithic effect of the objects. Mm-hmm. And also, I would say they were also able to take the advantage of a new platform. For just an example, so with a pack of the batteries underneath, mm-hmm. that makes all the space in a board very free.
Mm-hmm. Just so people understand this is the difference from a design perspective of a combustion engine, which would require a tunnel in the center, meaning less space to play with inside the car, perhaps, versus an electric car, which has the battery underneath and therefore has more space.
I mean, it's like tabula rasa. You can do whatever you want. It's a free space that you can manage as you wish. So this opened the possibility to, for example, to make a car, the first Ferrari with 5 seats.
Yeah.
So actually, it was shocking because, they didn't use any kind of rule connected to this job. Nevertheless, I have to admit, they did something really extraordinary, something completely different. So out of the box.
One of the things that is so important to not just people who own Ferraris, because this story is about many more of us who may never, is the feeling of being inside a Ferrari. It's the vibration, it's the aliveness, it's the rawness is the word that a lot of the experts that I spoke to in preparation for this interview used. How do you convey that feeling in an electric car?
The work done by the engineers is really striking, unbelievable, because when you drive a Ferrari, you and the machine, you are a single thing. So you have to feel the car with your body, with everything. So the question was how to transform this experience into something which is really Ferrari. So the engineers worked on introducing the new paddles, mm-hmm. the shifts, that really engage the driver in a completely different way. So although the technology is totally different, the propulsion is different, is very much a Ferrari experience. So this was important. But by the way, your question was very tricky. Eh?
Yeah, which one? What feels tricky about it?
My shock.
No, tell me what feels tricky. It's interesting. What feels tricky about it?
No, I didn't know if you wanted to provoke me. Don't worry. It's okay.
One of the things that struck me that you just said is that it's similar in sort of design concept to a capsule collection. And one of the things that is special about a capsule collection, I think, I'm speaking to one of the most famous designers in the world when I'm trying to explain this. My perception of this is that a capsule collection is a fairly safe, somewhat isolated space from the rest of a brand to experiment. Should people see the Ferrari Luce as the future of Ferrari?
Yes, of course. It's part of our idea of envisioning the future, mm-hmm. with real products and also, for example, concept cars. We never use, let's say, design features of a car to another car. This is not our approach. Normally, we don't like the déjà vu effect. The recognition of a Ferrari design or Ferrari, let's say, identity is based on much more profound aspects. So I wouldn't say that all the design features of this car will be then used for developed future products. No, we would like to keep this car with a very specific identity. But this is something that we do. That's clear.
Yes, and it answers a question that as a layperson I came in with, which is you could have, for example, built a two-seater that is all electric, that looks like I am imagining a Ferrari looks in my mind's eye. But what I'm hearing you saying is that that's actually simply not how Ferrari does things. That the idea of making a new car that is visually similar or is using the same design features of another car is just not what you would have ever considered doing in the first place.
True.
That helps me understand the difference here.
Yeah, you said maybe it could have been a two-seater. But the level of technology for the batteries is not enough to reach the peak of performance and also having, possibility to use the autonomy of the battery as we want. Okay, so
can I ask you there? I don't mean to interrupt the flow, but when you say that, I don't understand what the performance is necessarily that you're looking for, because many electric cars that use electricity can go faster.
Okay, good question.
So how do I think about performance
I
here?
Explain that,
please. Yeah,
correctly before. When we talk about performance, we think in terms of multidimensional performances. When you test an electric car, normally, everybody tests the longitudinal speed.
Yeah.
Which is not. It's just a single dimension of the performance. But when you want to have fun driving a supercar like a Ferrari, you have to think about the handling, about the lateral acceleration, about the brakes, and also the suspensions, everything that makes this experience so engaging and so visceral as well. Okay, so longitudinal speed is boring. I never enjoy driving an electric car just because of the speed. So normally, when we design another type of Ferrari, in terms of aerodynamics, the main objective is the downforce. Okay, the car must be stuck on the ground. Just an example, F80, that is the latest supercar, has a form which is able to generate 1,050 kilograms at 250 kilometers per hour.
Incredible.
So it's like having another car on top. Okay. The approach for an electric car is different. The main objective is the drag coefficient. The parameters are totally different. Must be like a kind of solid object, very pure. The body side must be almost continuous, almost flat. Even the wheels must be flat.
Why is it that in an electric car you don't need to worry about the downforce as much, but you do need to worry about the aerodynamics?
Because we also to think about efficiency. For example, the efficiency of the battery, which is fundamental. Okay, there is a beautiful animation. If you wish, I show you. You can see here. We can divide the shape of this object into parts. The glass house, that is a very aerodynamic kind of wedged shape.
Yep.
Okay. And this is something totally new. The fact that there is no engine in the front, like in a normal car, allowed the team of engineers to lower this point as much as we can. Okay. And then there is another object, which is this kind of shield. It becomes like an exoskeleton, generates two wings. One in the front, the other one on the rear.
As the air goes like that.
Yes. So the construction of the volume is very pure, very simple, but it's based on that principle of, drag as the main objective.
It's really interesting to hear you talk about the different design constraints and, to bring it back to what you said at the beginning, the design opportunities that are created when you're using a new technology.
The question is the capability of transforming constraints into opportunities.
I think if I remember this interview in 10 years, and apply it to my life, and I don't design cars, the thing that I will try to remember is this idea that constraints can be creative opportunities. That feels very rich to me.
But don't tell that to the engineers, because they think, no, but you said that. No, so that means also this is not difficult for you. No, you have to accept it and transform it into a beautiful thing. No.
Yeah, definitely.
Sometimes they are really scary.
Yeah. I have a question that I was worried to ask you because I thought it would come across as antagonistic in a way, and that's not what I want to do. When I was learning about the history of Ferrari, I would read these quotes from Enzo Ferrari, and he would say things like, when you buy a Ferrari, you buy the engine, I give you the rest for free. And so the question is, if you were telling Enzo Ferrari about the design of the Ferrari Luce, what would you say?
If you look at the history of Ferrari and also the cars that were developed until Ferrari was still alive, I mean, they are an incredible statement of innovation and process. Think about that. One of the last Ferraris was the F40, which is an incredible icon. If you look at the design of the car, it's something totally, radically different from the past. So if you think about Ferrari, you imagine a very, let's say, curvy and romantic shape. The F40 is exactly the opposite, with this angular and technical shape. So it's just an example. Because in the end, the approach of Enzo was always about vision and about progress. We have always to create a link, kind of bridge between past, not past and present, but past and future. Gustav Mahler said, tradition is not the worship of ashes. Tradition is the preservation of fire. What an incredible sentence. The legacy is important, the DNA of the brand is important, but the question is how you are able to evolve with this idea of the preservation of fire.
I don't know if this car will succeed or fail, but I do know that we win either way. If they fail, it's a correction that we all get to learn from. If they succeed, and that's what we spend the most time thinking about on this show, we'll see things that they did copied across the industry, affecting cars that we buy for the next decade or more. What we like to do at the end of huge conversations is think about how people will see this moment in 50 years, in a long time. When I'm dead, I will hopefully leave behind a bunch of stories that my greatest hope is that they will have shaped the world and the conversation about the future in a more optimistic direction. When people look at your body of work, and I want to take a moment with each of you, what do you hope that the impact of that work is?
I mean, I like this perspective. I always think about the future, how our outputs will be seen in the future. There is a beautiful sentence of the great architect Le Corbusier, who said, what's tradition? Tradition is the uninterrupted chain of all the innovations. Never forget that. So what makes sense is to make operations that are innovative. So if there is not a certain level of innovation, I mean, for me, this is not design, it's something else.
In many ways, I think I've always seen myself as a toolmaker, and so I've always been really clear, and what makes me the most happy is to be elevating, humanity, trying to make a contribution, trying to provide tools that move the species on. Industrial design, by definition, is a very young profession. And the early ideals, I think, were really beautiful. They were noble and selfless, and it was clear that you saw yourself in service. And that's how, that's truly how I've seen and understand my place in this practice, in this activity. And that sounds almost benign. I mean, I think that's those are easy words. But to do something that solves problems, which is by definition mainly defined by the problem, not the idea, to do that takes a huge resolve and a lot of courage and perseverance and great collaborators. And yeah, I think that defines, certainly that's what I would hope to be remembered for.
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Thank you both.
You are fantastic.
You were fantastic.
My God,
It's a real honor.
She is incredible because you transfer your feeling of emotional involvement, which is the best.
Appreciate it coming from you.
And I understand why you are so famous.
I'm gonna write that down in my journal. There are 2 more parts of this car that Ferrari hasn't released yet: how it sounds and how it actually drives. But I've heard it and I've driven it. So if you want to see that, coming soon. And if you want to support more optimistic science and tech stories, subscribe.